permitting or enabling such activities, with exceptions for private property, designated recreational areas, endowment lands, and certain state agency lands. I worked closely with Director Buxton to make sure that recreational camping is protected and that this legislation only prevents camping in places that were never designed to be campgrounds.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anthony.
I move that we introduce RS 32529.
Second.
Motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Taves, that RS 32529 be sent to print. Discussion. Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Let's see if you can do two in a row. RS 32551. Senator Galloway.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Cody Galloway and I represent Legislative District 15. This summer, I spent a lot of time campaigning both door to door and in many meet and greets and forums. As I listened to the people's concerns, housing was easily the number 2 priority for the people who elected me. Idahoans are frustrated at the shortage and high cost of housing here in the Treasure Valley. So today I bring you an RS. In essence, it asks for a timely review of building permit submissions so the process to build does not turn into a paperwork death spiral. It asks building permits boards to respond on completeness of an application within 10 days. It does not demand timed approval or denial, just the letting the applicant know if the submission is complete. This is a free market solution, and it allows for more efficient paperwork, timely reviews, and transparency in the process. It is a step towards making housing more affordable and meeting the needs of our constituents.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Anthony.
I move that we introduce RS 32551.
Second.
Motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Den Hartog, that RS 32551 be introduced. Discussion. Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Senator Galloway. That motion carries. Next, Senator Lent on RS 32520. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Turn that mic on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Lent, District 33, Idaho Senate. RS 32520 has to do with outcomes-based funding for education. As you know, we're right in the middle of a significant paradigm shift with our educational processes in our state. This is a first attempt to go out and actually change the model at which we fund our public education. Instead of schools that receive more money for doing worse, we're going to provide a base level of funding and then additional funding on top of that based on the performance of the students in a couple of areas. One is 8th grade math and the other one is post-secondary outcomes, starting with graduation requirements.
Senators? Senator Den Hartog?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we introduce RS 32520.
Second.
Motion by Senator Den Hartog, second by Senator Taves, that RS 32520 be sent to print. Discussion. Not seeing any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Senator. Next, and Senator Den Hartog, you're welcome to present from there on RS 32477.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This RS would repeal the Empowering Parents Grant Program.
Senator Anthony.
I move that we introduce RS 32477.
Second.
Motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Taves, that RS 32477 be sent to print. Discussion on the motion? Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. That motion is carried. Next, Senator Harris, you are the star of the show today with the next 4, RS 32560. Senator Anthony?
Mr. Chairman, would you be opposed to a motion for the next 4 RSs?
I would not be opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I move that we introduce RS 32560, RS 32478, RS 32569, and RS 32543.
Second.
Motion by Senator Anthony, second by Senator Den Hartog, that RS is 32560, 32478, 32569, and 32543 all be sent to print. And I would submit that Senator Harris must have curried favor with somebody. Any discussion on those motions? Don't see any, or on that motion. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Senator Harris. Next, Senator Lakey on House Bill 83. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators. For the record, my name is Todd Lakey, State Senator from District 23. And Mr. Chairman, if I might, Representative Crane and I have been working on this. Would it be okay if he went first and I went second?
Your choice. You can do however you want, Senator. Thank you.
Go ahead that way, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Crane, welcome to this side of the building. Just introduce yourself for the record.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Good morning. For the record information, Representative Jaron Crane, District 12 in Nampa. Those were some impressive motions. I mean, if I don't want to get in the way of a good motion, if you guys have something like that lined up for us.
I would hazard a guess that you're not going to be so.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm highly offended. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. So last session, we introduced this piece of legislation over in the House side. It passed overwhelmingly on the House side. We ran out of time to get it through the Senate here. But it's a piece of legislation that we modeled after Senate Bill 4 in Texas. Some of you might be familiar with the legal situation on the Senate Bill 4 in Texas. So I want to give you a current update on that as I called down to their deputy legal counsel. And I asked, what's going on down there? So currently, the status of that legislation is that the U.S. Supreme Court has given their initial approval to let it go into effect, and the Fifth Circuit has stated on their own. If the Fifth Circuit approves it, then the Supreme Court will probably rule in favor as well. I talked to the legal counsel in Texas, and I said, is there any changes you would make to your legislation if you could go back and do this all over again? He said, absolutely not. It's great legislation. There's going to be things like that when you bring something like this forward. So, no, go ahead and run it on through. So we went ahead and made our initial introduction. And once we made our initial introduction on this legislation, some groups came forward. So Representative Skog and I sat down with those groups and had some great discussions. Specifically, those are the home builders and the dairymen. They had some concerns with the legislation. So we sat down and worked through those, and we made some adjustments to that. And one of the things that we've done on this legislation is we've partnered with three great attorneys in Senator Lakey and talking to Senator Anthony and Representative Skog. So we've got some pretty big hitters when it comes to the legal side of what we're doing here. The fact is that millions of illegal aliens have come into this state. 35,000 in this state, but into this country over the last 4 years. The Trump administration estimates that on a conservative side, we're looking at 8 million. And if you look at other sources, they're going to tell you 30 million. There was an article put out by the Idaho Statesman last March that 35,000 of those individuals are here in the state of Idaho. The question is where and what's going on with that. So the purpose of this legislation is to give our state and local law enforcement agencies the ability to work with the federal government in order to combat this issue. So if we look at what the Trump administration has done, in his first week, he was able to go ahead and get to work on this issue. And he got 35,000 people and started deportation flights. If you look at 3,500 people, if you look at that number and you continue on that trajectory, that's about 182,000 people per year. So over his 4-year term, we're looking at only 728,000 people out of potentially 8 million on a conservative number or 30 million on that number. So we're not even going to make a dent. So states are going to have to start leaning into this, pressing forward and taking action to help the federal government with this issue. I'm going to allow, at this time, I'm going to yield my time to Senator Lakey and have him come forward.
Senator Lakey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Todd Lakey, State Senator from District 23. It's been a pleasure to work with Representative Crane and Representative Skog on this one. Senators, Representative Crane did a good job describing the lack of border security and the corresponding unfortunate increase in criminal activity, whether it's drugs or human trafficking. And we're taking action now at a federal level, but I think because of the size of the problem, it's important that we also make some efforts as a state to take steps in this regard as well. So you have, just described for you, you have House Bill 83, but you also have an engrossment in your packet that I provided. And what we've done is work to combine the two bills, House Bill 83 and Senate Bill 1039, which was Senator Anthony's bill. And that engrossment is a draft of that combination. What we've done is essentially take mostly the front portion of House Bill 83 and the back portion of Senate Bill 1039. Our ultimate request, Senators, will be to send this to the amending order to incorporate those amendments But let me go through the bill and describe things for you. And I'll talk mostly talk through mostly the engrossment. But what it does, it keeps the proposed Idaho Code Section 189002 and 9003 from House Bill 83, which are the first two portions. And then it gets rid of the criminal or court-ordered deportation process in the proposed 1963-01, which was in House Bill 83, and replaces that largely with portions from Senate Bill 1039. So let me walk through that engrossment with you. This legislation, Senators, focuses on enforcement for those illegal aliens that are detained, investigated, or suspected of engaging in separate criminal activity under Idaho Code Title 18 or Title 37. So this isn't just random out there looking for folks. It's people that are involved in criminal conduct under Idaho law before this comes and takes effect. It also focuses on a cooperative approach with the federal authorities, DHS and ICE, and not a really state dictatorial approach with the state action regarding deportation itself. So the deportation piece is cooperative with the federal government, not separate state action where we're transporting individuals out back to, pick your country, wherever they may be coming from. It provides for two offenses, which are 189003 and 9004. The first one being illegal entry into the state of Idaho from a foreign nation, and then illegal reentry once you've been deported or removed or subject to an order. It also provides some affirmative defenses, basically if you're in compliance with federal law or you haven't met the criteria for action under this proposed legislation. And then it provides for the cooperative process with Department of Homeland Security. And that comes in the form of exchange of information regarding these individuals, memorandums of understanding, cooperative use of resources between the state and the federal folks, and compliance with federal immigration detainers and warrants, as long as those individuals have served their portion of any state sentence in regard to their state criminal conduct, and that it does not impose an undue burden, risk, or expense to our local or state authorities for detaining these individuals. It also provides for a crime of trafficking in dangerous illegal aliens. So those that transport those that have criminal convictions into our state are subject to that trafficking charge. There's also a sentencing enhancement. If an illegal alien is convicted of a dangerous crime and they're here illegally, then there's a requirement that there be a sentence of at least 5 years imposed. And then in 189009, it provides that after arrest and during booking, there's a determination of the individual's foreign status, whether they're a foreign national, and then the responsibility to notify Department of Homeland Security. It also provides for some conditions of release on confinement. If you're an illegal alien, you have to have served your fixed portion of your sentence. So we're not letting anybody out of prison in Idaho that's supposed to be there for their fixed term. They can be released during their indeterminate portion if Department of Homeland Security is going to pick them up and deport them, or we're releasing that individual to another state or the federal government for further criminal proceedings. And that's some language I'll be adding that's not in that engrossment currently. And also it specifies they're not eligible for participation in alternate sentencing, things like work release, sheriff's inmate labor detail, because these individuals are essentially a flight risk because they're not here legally. It provides for authority to transport to a designated federal facility, and also clarifies that the application of these provisions are interpreted in accordance with federal immigration law. Senators, that's my presentation. I'd ask again that you send this to the 14th order to incorporate these amendments, melding these two bills. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you, Senator Lakey. Senator Ruckey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Lakey, I just want to make sure I understand the 18-9002 portion and 18-9003. So 18-9002, it appears It's a misdemeanor, and it would be for situations where there's an entry from a foreign nation, but not a re-entry, because that's covered in the next one.
Senator Lakey,
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckey, that's correct.
Okay.
follow up.
Yes, follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Lakey. And then the main difference then is just that re-entry, both 18-9-002 and 003 require that there has been, let's see, law enforcement can only enforce the provisions of those sections when a person is detained or investigated for suspected commission of an independent crime under Title 18 Idaho Code.
Senator Lakey,
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckey, that's correct. That prohibits just the random selection of anyone for prosecution under this code section. And then the engrossment also adds Title 37, Chapter 27, which are the drug provisions, drug trafficking, those kind of things.
And just one last
Senator-
follow-up.
Senator Ruckey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Lakey. Title 18 is broad, so that could include traffic stops. It could include lots of reasons that a law enforcement officer might stop an individual on the street or in their vehicle.
Senator Lakey,
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckey, so it doesn't include all of the traffic provisions under Title 49, I think.
Okay.
But there are certainly some misdemeanor offenses in Title 18 that would provide a basis for enforcement of this.
Okay, thanks.
other questions for either Senator Lakey or Representative Crane? Not seeing any. We have a couple signed up to testify. Rudy Rodriguez. Welcome to committee. Just introduce yourself and who you represent. Thank you for being here this morning.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Rudy Rodriguez, born and raised in Idaho, Burley, Idaho. We came to Idaho as migrants from Texas, from Uvalde, Texas, Menard, Texas. My dad was the first policeman in Idaho, Mexican policeman, the first to retire. I have a brother who's a detective and retired. And this bill concerns me because we already have a federal law, and no doubt about it, that President Trump has put down a foot on immigration, and that Governor Little has supported Governor Trump and ordered the state police to work with immigration. I don't understand why we need another law now with Idaho. What I'm concerned with, folks, is that racial profiling. You know, I'm sure that you guys haven't been stopped and asked for your papers and asked where you come from. But let me tell you about my history. When I was in the 5th grade, Mrs. Burnside's room, all the Mexican kids and the Indians, Native Americans, were taken outside and we checked for lice. Okay, and no other person was done that. There's issues and issues happen in my life. The other day I was in a restaurant. Those who don't know me, I play in a mariachi group. A gentleman in front of me told me, "You better enjoy your time here in Idaho because they're going to deport you." Okay, I'm a U.S. citizen. They're not going to deport me. 3 weeks ago in Caldwell, these 3 guys were in a pickup with a trailer. Didn't do anything wrong, but they were stopped. And all 3 of these gentlemen, they were asked for their IDs. Why? I mean, why ask for IDs? You know, we met with the chief of Ingram, talked about it, and I think it's going to help out. But in Meridian, 2 weeks ago, 3 boys were going to a game in Meridian High School. They were stopped. The 2 gentlemen, young boys in the front, they were Caucasian. The guy in the back seat was dark colored, and they asked him for his He was the only one that asked for his ID, but he was Caucasian. I think this bill is dangerous. It's going to do a lot of the profiling. We already have federal laws in action. You know, and I don't understand it. We're not in Texas. We're not a border state. We're in Idaho. You know, there's been so many things happening in discrimination all my life. I'm a retired policeman, and I'm against this rule because we already have the federal law, and no doubt about it, the government is going to enforce it. But it's the opinion of a lot of Hispanics today. Is the state police, are they going to go door to door with immigration now and ask everybody for their IDs? I don't know. I don't think so. They don't have time.
Yeah. If you could wrap up, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm against this bill. I don't think we need to have immigration courts. This is what this is going to cause. Immigration courts. You're going to have judges who want these people to be. They want them deported. Judges they're already busy. They're booked already. They don't need it. So I'm against it, and I want to thank you for your consideration. This is the first time I ever testified here in Idaho. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here this morning. I don't see any questions. Thank you. Amy Dundon. Welcome to committee.
Thank you.
Your name and who you represent?
Thanks. Good morning, Chairman Guthrie, members of the committee. My name is Amy Dundon. I'm here on behalf of the ACLU of Idaho, and we're testifying in opposition to House Bill 83. It's an extreme anti-immigrant bill that threatens due process in ways that are not only unconstitutional, but dangerously prone to applicability and enforcement issues. It would callously redirect critical state resources to an unconstitutional attempt to intervene in federal law, and it portends untold but predictably devastating consequences for communities across our state. The bill would almost certainly be applied and enforced in ways that are uneven and deeply racialized. It would allow local law enforcement to funnel family, friends, and loved ones into the deportation pipeline, threatening the rights and dignity of communities across Idaho and bedrock civil and constitutional rights. And because HB 83 creates new state crimes, it would undoubtedly burden our already strained judiciary, our state judges who are not trained in immigration law enforcement, nor do they have the proper authority to enforce it, would be permitted and in some cases compelled to order a person's deportation without due process and before the person has an opportunity to seek humanitarian protections. The bill's predictable impact on Idaho's public defense system is also important to note, particularly at a moment when untenable caseloads appear to be intractable, and the ongoing departure of frontline public defenders shows no signs of slowing. Finally, HB 83 is fundamentally flawed in ways that the court would almost certainly recognize. The bill is not meaningfully different than Texas's SB 4, which the conservative Fifth Circuit declared was likely preempted by federal law. We anticipate our Ninth Circuit's review of HB 83 would yield identical outcomes. We urge your opposition this morning, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Senator Ruckty has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dundon, I wanted to get your thoughts on this language. It's found in 18-9002, the proposed 18-9002, and the proposed 18-9003. Law enforcement officers may enforce provisions of this section only when a person is detained or investigated for suspected commission of an independent crime under Title 18. It seems to me that the detained or investigated is really broad language, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the practical applications of that and maybe even the constitutional implications of it.
Ms. Dundon.
Chair Guthrie, Senator Ruckdy, I'm gonna agree that if we're looking at that area of code, it is rather broad. I think your suspicion is correct. I don't know that I could speak to. I might be able to phone a friend, actually. I have a couple folks in this room who could help me out with the constitutionality of it. Because I'm not an attorney, I can't speak directly to that. But we do have concerns about the broad and sweeping nature. I think the applicability here is deeply concerning for reasons the previous testifier lined up for us. And I think you're on the right track here concerning the breadth of that particular area of law.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone, I don't have anyone else in the queue here. Is there someone else that tried to sign up and was not successful that wants to speak to this legislation? Not seeing anyone. Senator Lakey or Representative Crane, however you want to tag team the close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just, Todd Lakey, State Senator from District 23. I'll just offer some brief comments in conclusion. Senators, the problem that we're facing is massive as a result of the lack of border security. It necessitates the impacts on the state of Idaho. We've talked about this for years. The increase in crime, whether it's drugs, human trafficking, it requires a cooperative effort between the state and the federal government. I don't think because of the nature of the problem, once we get it in control, then that can perhaps be reeled back, and it's primarily on the federal government. We incorporated those additional provisions, so there has to be some connection to independent state crime, not profiling. You could make that profiling argument about any criminal case in Idaho, not just this. So this adds an extra additional layer of protection, requiring that connection to separate criminal conduct under Idaho code. We have impacts. We have a northern border. You don't think about it much from Canada, but they are taking steps to increase their border security. And then we feel the impacts of both the southern and northern border in the state of Idaho. Senators, we can't condone illegal presence in the state of Idaho or illegal activity. And I will note some differences between our legislation and Texas. Representative Crane talked about the current status of the case, but there are differences. And one of those is the incorporation with the separate criminal conduct in the state of Idaho. Texas doesn't have that. We also removed the separate order to be required to be deported, which is incorporated into the Texas statute. And we replaced that with the cooperative approach that we have from Senator Anthon's bill. Texas also has a much more lengthy immunity and indemnification provisions. But we have taken steps to make this more Idaho and distinguish it a little bit from the Texas statute. Mr. Chairman, again, I'd ask that you send this to the 14th order. I'd be happy to answer additional questions if you have them.
Are there additional questions for either? Looks like there is. Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Crane had brought something up, and I don't know who would be the best person to answer it. Maybe Representative Crane?
Yeah, just whoever you'd like, or pose the question.
I'll pose the question. So it was mentioned that the Dairy Association and the builders had some concerns, and it sounded like those were worked through. I was just, I guess, curious if we could maybe understand what those concerns were and how that was kind of came about.
Representative or Senator, whoever would like to.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we can tag team it. I can answer the question, I think, and then if Representative Crane has some additional comments. But we have worked, Senator Shippey, we have worked with the dairymen and their legal counsel, Mr. Claiborne. We've also incorporated comments from our law enforcement community. And that connection with separate Idaho criminal activity was part of that collaboration that we incorporated into this bill. Along with some of the details in regards to how we work with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security versus a separate court order for deportation.
Oh, come on. Yeah, special deal,
Representative
right?
Crane.
That makes everybody
Thank you,
feel
Mr.
good.
Chairman, and thank you, Senator Shippey.
All
The only thing I would
4,000
add to
of them
that
in the areas.
is Senator Ruckty had a question on some language. Was it too broad? That language actually came from David Claiborne, the legal counsel for the Dairymen's Association. So he wanted to guarantee that we were targeting specifically criminals in this language. So that was his amendment.
Congress has.
Senator Ruckty.
You're out of line, guys.
Thank you,
The
Mr.
states
Chairman.
don't have this right.
I guess I'm wondering why the language detained or investigated as opposed to convicted. Because detained, here's the obvious concern I have. Detained or investigated, it just seems to me that law enforcement could use lots of reasons to detain or investigate for suspected commission of an independent crime. All those words together just are so soft that it seems to me that it creates maybe a temptation for a law enforcement individual to profile.
Senator Leahy.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Ruckty, so that language again provides a connection to criminal conduct in Idaho. It essentially provides a similar basis for law enforcement to respond to any individual, regardless of whether this immigration illegal presence code is in place. So if an individual meets the criteria for a traffic stop, reasonable articulable suspicion, or they view a misdemeanor occurring in their presence, or those kind of things, this basically just lays that out. There has to be a separate basis under Idaho law, and they're not stopping him for this. So essentially, it emphasizes the existing state of the law.
Senator Ruckty, follow up.
Separate question, Mr. Chairman, Senator Leahy. So are the dairymen, who all is endorsing this bill?
Senator Leahy.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the dairymen. It was my understanding that they're supportive. And I see a nod from Chairman Crane.
Nothing in writing.
Law enforcement is neutral, but I don't know the full breadth
like
of
Fox
that
News.
as far as the particular agencies.
Senator Ruckty.
No, thank you.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Leahy, I've heard of a situation, and I know it's not isolated, where a lady was born in the state of Oklahoma, and she didn't receive a birth certificate or any papers. Her parents had some religious convictions against it at the time. They later moved to Missouri, I believe it was. Missouri was willing to give a birth certificate, but it had to come through Oklahoma. Oklahoma said to this day, my understanding, this lady's in her, I think, late 30s, still has not been able to get any kind of paperwork. If she were to be detained under this law, being born and raised in the United States, what would happen in her situation?
Senator Leahy.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Shippey, I guess that's part of the federal determination. This statute is based on compliance with federal law. So if she can establish that she's here lawfully, that's a defense to this action. I don't know the details of how this unique situation would be handled
Congress
with that
had a
individual.
bipartisan deal
But broadly,
earlier
this
in the
is
spring
based on
of
compliance
last
with
year
federal law.
that allowed undocumented and entry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And
Senator
permits
Leahy,
that
I don't believe she has
Trump,
any
told
way
him
to
not
establish that she
not
is
to pass the
here
law because
lawfully,
it helped him get elected.
besides people that have known her since she was born. I know it's not completely isolated, but I'm sure it's rare. I'm curious of what would take place if she were to be a traffic stop or whatever it might be, if she was choosing to drive without a driver's license or so forth.
Senator Leahy.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Shippey, so there's the process described once someone is detained for this and they're going through a booking process. They have to make some initial determination whether they're a foreign national, and things like a state-issued identification, federal ID. Those are the kinds of things that are used to establish whether or not they're a foreign national and what Department of Homeland Security may do with them.
Don't see any other questions. Just a couple of comments. And should the request by the sponsors be agreed to, and it is sent to the 14th, the only thing I would offer is if there's still some language that's a little unsettling or a little, unclear, amendments can still be considered beyond what maybe you've outlined. And I think you had even
This is
indicated
racial
you had some
profiling
things
if you haven't
in
figured it
addition to
out.
what your
If you're a
engrossed
person of
sheet
color.
said. So I guess that's one
Law enforcement will
advantage
stop and ask for the
to look
IDs.
at in case maybe something was missed. The other comment I would make is that this issue's been around for a while, and it's been of great concern for a great while. And I guess I've appreciated that the willingness of different viewpoints to work together and try to come to some kind of consensus on an issue that is incredibly difficult and somewhat contentious and very important. And I know I was in one meeting where I saw that collaboration and whether we get there and whether it ends up being perfect or not, that aside, I appreciated the working groups that have kind of come together to coalesce on something that hopefully will be the right fit for Idaho. Senator Harris.
Yeah, as if
Mr. Chairman,
everybody just has a
just like to
stays in
know if I
Idaho
concur with your
through
statements.
life,
I would like to make a motion.
Motion's in order.
I would move to send House Bill 83 to the 14th order for possible amendments.
Motion by Senator Harris, second by Senator Den Hartog, that House Bill 83 be sent to 14th order for possible amendments. Discussion on the
What are
motion.
the amendments? Huh?
Senator Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To speak to the motion, I want to thank Representative Crane, Representative Skog, Senator Lakey for the work that's been done here. As the committee will remember, I introduced
Skog,
Senate Bill
Anthony,
1039,
Lakey, you're all lawyers.
which was styled the Idaho ICE Act
It
here a few
helps,
weeks ago.
helps open the doors
after
to-
I did that, I saw this particular
to,
bill being introduced in the
business.
House, and I recognized there was
They would be
considerable
happy to
overlap.
have somebody come in
And,
that's been wrongfully
and so I
arrested
thought that it'd be better just
into
to
their
work
office
together.
and says, yeah, sure. I'll
And
help
as we
you.
worked through
I'm a
that,
lawyer.
and as we visited with the Idaho prosecutors, with a number of stakeholders, the law enforcement of the state of Idaho, and as we even visited with ICE representatives, we realized that there was some fine tuning to do here. And what we're presenting to you today is that fine tuning as best as we could do it.
Congress
there have
has
been a number of questions
the
about
power
what is
to
being
regulate
described as broad
immigration,
language.
not the states.
What that broad
not
language
Idaho.
is absolutely positively the actual practice of law enforcement today. It is the practice of when you pick up somebody who is doing something criminal and you bring them to the police station.
As that testifier
There's
said.
a practice of determining
who
they
it's
are
racial profiling.
and whether they're here in the country
Baloney,
legally.
Mr. Anthony.
That's all that language is.
Yeah, right.
And that is language that was brought to us and approved by law enforcement. It's simply the process of determining once they've been detained for criminal activity. Let me say that one more time.
You know, he's very articulate,
Someone who
Mr.
has been
Anthony.
detained for
You know,
criminal
he works for
activity,
the city of Twin Falls, I think he says.
not randomly stopped on the street, not
and,
randomly stopped
and he
at
gets
the
a
movie
lot of money
theater.
to keep coming back to the Idaho Senate.
They've done something criminal.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
They've been
from
brought to the police station because
corporate,
they've done something criminal.
lobbies and PACs.
There's a process that you go through to decide who they are,
Yeah.
whether they're here in the country
How would
legally.
you like? How would you like if you had?
That's what's described in the
a child that was
language
of
that's
color.
been described at the hearing
How would,
today. And
how
by the
would
way,
you
it's in the
feel
engrossment.
when they went out
So the
tonight
testimony
to
that you've
see
heard
their
today by
their
witnesses
friends maybe drive a car
who haven't even seen the language,
and their profile? This bill profiles,
which is interesting.
Yeah, it's
isn't
interesting.
worth
all
much
right.
in my
It's interesting that what you're saying is to open business for you and the other lawyers.
Correct. In my professional career,
As a lawyer,
I spent a lot of time going to Texas. It was 20 years of work. It was very interesting. I went usually 3 to 4 times a year to McAllen, Texas. I'd go for a few days a year to McAllen, Texas, 3 or 4 times a year. And that was very eye-opening for me. And so I was very interested to hear the testimony of the gentleman who testified today. I think he testified he came from that area originally. It's a beautiful place, lots of great people down there. Many of the folks that I worked with were amazing people, folks who were Hispanic. And when I worked with them, almost inevitably, every time I went there,
way to go there. Just shifting the narrative.
they gave me expressions of concern.
You bet.
And what they were concerned about was the open border. They were horrified.
You're saying it's an open border. It's not open border in terms, you've labeled that.
And
Trump has labeled that.
What they were describing actually in
Crane
many cases were Chinese
has labeled
nationals
that.
sneaking across
It's not
the border
open border.
in McAllen, Texas, and in that
People
community,
are
in Mission,
moving. They
Texas.
always migrate. And people in Nicaragua,
And they're
for
concerned
example,
for
in
national
Central
security.
America, they are at 6,000 feet and they've had
what were
droughts
we
and they
gonna do
cannot
about it?
grow crops to feed their
This was before I
families.
was in the legislature.
And so they're migrating here.
We have
They're
a
migrating all
very
over the world.
serious problem on our borders.
Yeah, this is Texas
And
baloney that
as
he's
we
spewing.
try to do something about it,
Terrorize
I'm always
people
concerned
of
with
color.
the response. In my district, South Central Idaho, it's somewhat of a crossroads. We market it as a logistics hotspot. It's a great place to ship potatoes out of. We've mastered that. You can ship a fresh potato out of there and hit all kinds of spots all over the United States. We've mastered it. It's also a great place to ship in drugs. You
China's
can
already
bring drugs
retaliating.
from Mexico in there, and
They're buying their
you can
spuds
ship them all over
at
the
other
place
places
from
around the
our
world.
area. And it has happened, and it happens every day. And I remember when I first became a city prosecutor, and I visited with my sheriff. What was very clear is that the vast majority of the crimes and the criminals that were sitting in our county jail had something to do with methamphetamines, or something to do with some kind of drug that was flowing in from our southern border into my little town. We have a problem with our southern
town
border.
that has that problem. The whole country has a problem.
And it is troubling and
if it
maybe
wasn't
even hurtful
consumption, there wouldn't be a problem.
that every
right?
time we try to address it, we are labeled some kind of a bigot. As a matter of fact, I'm very, very proud that in my district, the city that I love and I work in, is about 40% Hispanic. And I love my city. And I love the people of my city. I'm very, very proud that I
If you
was
vote for
the
this,
city attorney for the city of
You don't
Minidoka.
love the Hispanic population. 40%
It's a
who puts you
tiny
in
town.
office.
I loved it. They paid me $50 a month to be the city attorney. Did it for, I think, 12, 13 years. I think it's the most Hispanic city in the state of Idaho, as a matter of fact. And we had members of the city council who did not speak English very well. I was proud to do that work.
Proud, yes. I'm proud of this bill too because I'm
And
going to put
if there is
fear
ever an instance in the state
in
of Idaho
every person
where
of color.
someone is discriminated against because of their ethnicity or their background, to hell with them. It's wrong. And it has no place in the state of Idaho. And I condemn it. But it has not changed
Who's he talking
the
to?
fact
Is he
that we have
talking
a
to a
problem on our
jury?
southern border.
Or is
gotta do something
or is this a clip that he can
And
use
this piece of legislation today is
26
very finely
when he's up
focused
for re-election again?
on criminal
And he's been there, what, 12,
conduct.
15, 16 years?
And the people who are deported, and then they come back. And they do more crime.
No, give me a
And I'm not talking about a
There's
speeding ticket.
4,000
We're talking about drug
undocumented
crime.
We're
talking about violent, dangerous crime.
Idaho dairies. And the reason is, when they try to hire locals,
That's
it's
what
too
this
hard
bill
work.
does. And it creates mandatory
And
minimum
they're paid,
sentences for people who
$21 an
are
hour,
coming back
and
and
they're
coming
well taken
back.
care of. So this
and
is a
endangering
political
Idahans.
speech that he'll use to say, see, I really support
I'm proud to do something about that.
Hispanic voters.
And I will continue to fight for that.
You bet.
And I will continue to fight for my friends who are Hispanic in this state to make sure they are not discriminated against.
Yeah,
And the two can be together.
So you're gonna pass it. You're gonna vote for this, aren't you?
So for
sir?
that reason, Mr. Chairman, I will be proud to send this to the amending order and continue to work on this issue. Thank you.
Geez.
Thank you, Senator. And I would just note that obviously House Bill 83 is the one on the agenda, and those that have concerns are not aware of the potential amendments. And I would hope that once that is amended and engrossed, should it get to the 14th, that maybe it will mitigate some of the concerns. I just want those to know that have concerns and have showed up, that we appreciate those opinions. And again, you're privy to House Bill 83 and maybe not so much to the considerable amendments that might be considered. Senator Repty.
Yeah, amendment.
Thank you,
right?
Mr. Chairman.
AAAA.
I actually think that the comments just made by the pro tem are consistent with what I was concerned about when it came to the language found in 18-9001 subparagraph 3 and 18-9003 subparagraph
You know what it's for.
and that is the language
Lucky.
that talks about
And
a person is
you're just picking out
detained or
the
investigated for suspected
line
commission
items.
of an independent crime. The comment that was made was they've done something criminal. They've done something criminal in the United States means you've been convicted. It doesn't mean you are suspected of something, that you've been detained or investigated because you're suspected of having done something. That's part of our constitutional rights. And that was a point I was making. If they're convicted, wouldn't that be a better basis upon which to prevent profiling? Because now they've had to go through due process. You've had to use the court system and all the protections of the court system to ensure that this individual wasn't just picked up off the street, randomly profiled, or some other abuse was made. One other comment. It was mentioned during testimony that we can't condone undocumented individuals coming across the border, but that, frankly, is exactly what we've done in this nation. We condone it. It's why 40% of the pro tem's constituents are Hispanic. It's why we enjoy lower prices for milk, for hotel prices, for restaurant prices. It's because we rely on that labor. Now, I have no problem if we fix the immigration system. I have no problem if we do those things. But let's not pretend like they're the problem and we're not.
Bravo.
They're the problem because we are the problem.
You bet.
We're the ones who invite undocumented workers to come over and help us fill job requirements that Americans won't do. And so to pretend otherwise, I think, is insulting to ourselves. And it's insulting to those hardworking Hispanic families that come over here and integrate themselves into our communities. Are there some that commit crimes and we would prefer to leave? Yes. Yes. But overall, those families contribute to our communities. They make them better places to live. Our kids go to school with them. They grow up with them. They enjoy friendships with them.
Right
so,
on.
Yeah, I am insulted by the bill. I'll be voting no. And I can't, if people feel like this is an attack, that somehow we're saying if you support the bill that you're bigoted, I can't do anything about that. I don't think anybody's bigoted who's bringing this bill or supporting the bill. I get it. It's a complicated issue, but I'm not taking responsibility for how somebody else feels. You got to do that on your own.
I don't see any other discussion. Again, we have a motion by Senator Harris, second by Senator Den Hartog, that House Bill 83 be sent to 14th Amendment for possible, or 14th Order for possible amendments. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Senator Ruckey will be recorded as voting no. That motion carries.